What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what he assumes will be a friendly, late-night interview only to find himself cornered in a setup so intense it made his most iconic roles seem like a walk in the park? Tonight, we're unpacking the fiery clash between Richard Gere and Stephen Colbert, an exchange that left the audience stunned, had producers scrambling behind the scenes, and security on high alert. This wasn't your average celebrity interview, gone off script. This was a targeted ambush that peeled back the curtain on the darker side of late-night TV, and by the time we're through, you'll understand why Richard Gere felt he had no option but to walk off that stage. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below, because this story, it's deeper than it seems, and it might just make you rethink everything you thought you knew about media control and manipulation. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was buzzing with its usual high-energy prep. Richard Gere, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, sat calmly in the green room going over his talking points with his publicist. His appearance was meant to highlight his newest humanitarian mission and effort, close to his heart, focused on refugee aid. It was supposed to be simple, just another typical interview like so many he had done throughout his long career. "Mr. Gere, we're ready for you," said a production assistant with a friendly smile. As he headed toward the stage, Gere felt that familiar calm blend of confidence and routine. The crowd welcomed him warmly, applauding as he stepped out and waved, then took his seat across from Colbert. Richard Gere. "Everyone," Colbert beamed, flashing his trademark smile. But there was something different about his expression tonight, an edge in his eyes that wasn't usually there. "Thanks for being here, Richard. Always great to have you on the show." "Thank you, Stephen. I'm glad to be here and excited to share what we've been doing with the International Rescue Committee," Gere replied, his tone sincere. Colbert leaned back in his chair, that signature smirk creeping across his face. "Oh, we'll get to that," he said. "But first, I think our audience is curious about some of your recent remarks on American foreign policy. You've been quite outspoken on a few political matters lately." Gere raised an eyebrow. This wasn't part of the pre-interview rundown. His publicist had been clear about the agreed-upon topics, and politics wasn't one of them. "Well, Stephen, I think there's been a mix-up. I'm here to talk about humanitarian work tonight, not politics." "Come on, Richard," Colbert pushed, his tone suddenly more serious. "You can't publicly criticize government policies and then sidestep the conversation by falling back on humanitarian work when it gets uncomfortable. Accountability doesn't work like that, does it?" The studio grew tense. The audience, sensing something was off, fell into a hush. Gere kept his cool, though a subtle clench in his jaw suggested otherwise. "I'm not hiding behind anything, Stephen. I use whatever voice I have to help those in need. If that means sometimes speaking out on policies that affect vulnerable communities, then I'll do that." "Sometimes?" Colbert's voice grew sharper. His signature eyebrow lift now felt more confrontational than comedic. "You've made 17 public statements in the last 6 months alone, criticizing everything from immigration laws to military budgets. That sounds less like occasional opinion and more like a political platform." Gere leaned forward, the tension rising. His calm was starting to give way. "I'm sorry, but what's happening here? We had a clear agreement about what we'd be discussing tonight." "Oh, really?" Colbert said with exaggerated surprise. "Must have missed that memo." "But here's the deal, Richard, when actors start positioning themselves as authorities on politics, I think the public deserves to know what qualifies them to do so. What gives a celebrity the right to lecture America on complicated global issues?" The room had fallen into complete silence. Gone were the usual bursts of laughter and applause, replaced instead by a heavy, uneasy tension that seemed to creep into every corner of the studio. From backstage, Gere's publicist looked visibly shaken, her face pale as she tapped urgently on her phone. "Stephen, with all due respect, I've never claimed to be a political expert," Gere said calmly, holding his ground despite the clear attempt to provoke him. "I'm just a citizen who cares about human rights and social justice." He continued, "The same Constitution that gives you the freedom to ridicule politicians on national television also gives me the right to speak out about policies that impact real people's lives." Colbert's smile widened, but whatever. Warmth it once had was gone. "Oh, hiding behind the Constitution, now how convenient," he said. "Tell me, Richard, when you make these sweeping declarations about American policy, are you speaking as Richard Gere the humanitarian, or Richard Gere the guy living in a $40 million mansion lecturing blue-collar Americans on morality?" But landed hard. Gere's eyes flared with anger, and for the first time during the interview, the smooth calm he had maintained began to unravel. "That's a cheap shot, Stephen, and you know it," he said sharply. "My financial situation doesn't disqualify my concern for human suffering, doesn't it, though?" Colbert pushed, leaning in like a predator sensing blood. "It's easy to push for open borders when you live behind gates. It's easy to condemn military budgets when national security doesn't affect your daily life. Some might call that privilege. Others might call it hypocrisy." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the usual witty back-and-forth Colbert was known for. This felt targeted, intentional, and was getting uglier by the second. Gere took a long breath, trying to compose himself again. "Stephen, I came here tonight in good faith to talk about work that's saving lives. If you want a meaningful conversation about these topics, I'm open to it. But if this is just a setup to create a viral spectacle at my expense, then we have a serious issue." "Setup?" Colbert echoed, his tone dripping with theatrical offense. "Richard, this is journalism. Public figures making public statements should expect to be held accountable. Unless, of course, you think being a celebrity means you're exempt from the same scrutiny you expect politicians to face." They locked eyes across the desk, the energy in the room turning almost suffocating. What began as a routine late-night appearance had taken a sharp, darker turn, and everyone watching knew they were witnessing something explosive. Accountability? Gere's voice had changed. It was sharper now, no longer wrapped in diplomacy. "Let's talk about that, Stephen. What about the accountability of a host who misleads his guests about the nature of the interview just to stir up controversy? What about someone who uses their platform not to inform but to tear down people, trying to make a positive impact?" Colbert's eyes sparkled, and for a moment he looked almost thrilled. This was the reaction he had wanted. "Ah, now we're getting to the heart of it," he said. "So you're saying I'm the real issue here? Not the millionaire actor who thinks he can shape American policy because he's famous, but the host who dares to ask tough questions. I'm saying you're twisting things." Gere shot back, his voice rising, his frustration peeking through. "You brought me here under false pretenses, and now you're distorting everything I say to serve your own narrative." The audience was glued to their seats not because they were entertained, but because they were witnessing something raw and unraveling right in front of them. This wasn't just an awkward moment. It was like watching a slow-motion collision that no one could stop. You've been making political statements for months. Did you really think you could walk onto a political comedy show and dodge tough questions? That's not how this works. Tough questions. Gere's voice rose sharply. You call personal attacks and deliberate misrepresentations tough questions? You're not here for a real conversation, Stephen. You're here for a takedown. Colbert's usual charm disappeared. His expression hardened, calculated now. "You know what I think, Richard? I think you've spent too long surrounded by people who constantly praise you. You've forgotten what it's like to be challenged, to hear someone actually question your beliefs rather than just nod along because of your fame." "That's ironic," Gere snapped, his anger rising. "Coming from someone who's made a career out of preaching to the choir. When was the last time you sat down with someone who truly disagreed with you? When did you last question your own ideas instead of just mocking everyone else's?" The studio fell into a tense silence. Even the camera crew hesitated, unsure if they should keep filming. Offstage, Colbert's producers frantically signaled, but it wasn't clear if they wanted to stop the interview or let the moment play out. "You really want to know what I think?" Colbert's voice dropped to a whisper, every word carrying. "Wait, I think you're a hypocrite. You've lived in a Hollywood bubble for so long, you've lost touch with reality. You honestly believe your opinions matter more than others because people have told you for years that you're special, and now you've started to believe it. Gere's fists clenched on his lap, visibly trembling. And I think you're a bully, Colbert continued. So drunk on your own influence that you've forgotten the line between comedy and cruelty. Tonight you're not a comedian, just another media predator feeding off outrage. A bully? Colbert added with a sarcastic edge. I'm asking you to defend your public views. If that makes me a bully, what does that make you? Someone who wants to push political ideas without facing a shred of criticism. I never said I'm above criticism, Gere responded, his voice tight with frustration. But there's a difference between genuine critique and what you're doing right now. This isn't about my ideas, it's about you trying to humiliate me for your audience's amusement. Colbert leaned back, his smile reappearing, but this time colder, more sinister. If you feel humiliated, maybe that says more about the strength of your arguments than my questions. Maybe your views fall apart under real scrutiny? Scrutiny? Gere's composure finally cracked. You're calling these personal jabs and strawman arguments scrutiny? You haven't addressed anything I've said, just twisted my words, and tried to make me look like a fool. Or, Colbert replied in a syrupy tone, maybe I just didn't treat you with the reverence you think you deserve. Maybe the real issue isn't with my questions. Richard, maybe it's that you're not as immune to criticism as you believed. The audience began to fidget. What they expected to be a sharp, funny exchange had turned into something far darker, a public reckoning. Gere stood abruptly, the screech of his chair cutting through the heavy silence. You know what, Stephen? You were right about one thing. I did make a mistake. I assumed you still cared about real issues. But all you want now is applause, not answers. Oh, walking out already? Colbert's voice dripped with insincerity. I thought we were here to talk about accountability. Isn't storming off the set kind of the opposite of that? I'm not running away, Gere said quietly, coldly. I'm just not going to sit here while you carry what was supposed to be a standard interview had quickly turned tense. There's a difference between questioning and character assassination, Gere said sharply. Colbert stood up, his voice climbing. I've only asked you to defend the positions you've taken in public. If that feels like an attack on your character, maybe it's time to rethink those positions. Gere turned to face him head-on, fury burning in his eyes. You want to know what real character assassination looks like, Stephen? It's inviting someone to your show under false pretenses, then ambushing them with personal jabs while pretending. It's journalism. It's using your platform to tear people down instead of actually engaging with what they believe. Bully? Colbert's voice cracked. Richard, you're a grown man, worth hundreds of millions with access to every media outlet in the country. How am I bullying you? Exactly like every bully does, Gere snapped. You're using your power to humiliate someone, not to challenge their ideas. Doing it on national TV doesn't make it noble, it makes it worse. They stood across the desk from each other, the studio heavy with silence, only the quiet hum of the cameras filling the air. What started as a typical celebrity segment had descended into something raw and unpredictable. A televised confrontation completely off the rails. Colbert, red-faced, dropped his media mask. Let's talk about power, Richard. The power of celebrities who think they can preach morality while living in a world most Americans can't even dream of. The kind of privilege that convinces you your opinions matter more than anyone else's. I never claimed my views mattered more, Gere said, his voice low but simmering with restrained rage. But I have the same right as anyone to speak up. The difference is, you're trying to shut me down, not through debate, but through humiliation. Silencing you? Colbert let out a bitter laugh. You're literally on national TV right now, Richard. How can I be silencing you? By asking questions you don't want answered, Gere countered. By setting up a hostile environment? Just to make me look like a fool? You lied about what this interview was supposed to be, and when I pushed back, you attacked me. Now, the audience wasn't just quiet, they looked uncomfortable, undisturbed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was personal and ugly. You want to know your real problem, Stephen? Gere said, his voice suddenly dropping into a low, sharp whisper. You've become the exact kind of media figure you used to mock. Someone who attacks people, not ideas. Someone who uses his platform to go after people instead of having real conversations. You've become the very thing you once stood against. For the first time, Colbert seemed genuinely shaken. That's a bold claim coming from someone who spent the last 10 minutes complaining about being asked tough questions. Gere's voice rose again. This isn't accountability, it's cruelty. You didn't bring me here to discuss ideas. You brought me here to tear me down, to feed your audience a spectacle. And tonight, you've shown the world the difference between holding someone accountable and just enjoying their public humiliation. Colbert's expression hardened, something cold flickering behind his eyes. I think the truth is, Richard, you're just not used to being treated like everyone else. You're angry because, for once, someone isn't giving you special treatment. Someone's treating you like an ordinary man with opinions, and you can't handle that. You're a coward. Gere didn't even flinch. No, Stephen. You're a coward. You're so scared of an honest exchange that you resort to ambush and cheap shots. You've forgotten how to challenge ideas because it's easier to just attack the person behind them. Out-of-character assassination disguised as an interview. His face flushed red as he struggled to find the right words. Coward? I'm not the one running from tough questions. Gere stayed calm, his voice cold and measured. You haven't asked me anything difficult, Stephen. All you've done is throw insults, trying to bait me into losing my temper. And you know what? Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted, your viral moment, your controversy. I hope tearing down what little integrity you had left was worth it. With controlled movements, Gere began unclipping his mic. But what you didn't expect was this by revealing your true colors tonight. You've ended up exposing yourself far more than you've ever managed to expose me. Colbert's voice cracked slightly, trying to regain control. Don't act like this is some moral high ground. You're walking out because you can't take the heat. I'm walking out, Gere said firmly, because there's no point in talking to someone who cares more about scoring points than seeking truth. I won't be a part of the circus you've created. He turned toward the audience, voice strong and clear. I came here to speak about refugees, real people, dying while we sit here playing politics. But instead, I've been ambushed, smeared for the sake of headlines. If this is what passes for dialogue in America today, then we should all be ashamed. Colbert sounded more desperate now. Richard, come on. This is just how interviews go when you're a public figure with controversial views. Gere looked back one last time. No, Steve. This is what happens when the interviewer is more focused on tearing someone down than understanding where they're coming from. This is when comedy becomes cruelty and journalism turns into a blood sport. He began walking toward the exit, his steps calm and assured. You want to talk about controversy? Here's something really controversial. The fact that someone in your position thinks this behavior is okay. That you've forgotten the line between accountability and public humiliation. Colbert called after him, voice raised. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? What about the refugees you wanted to speak for? At the edge of the stage, Gere paused and turned back. My message is still the same, Stephen. When someone invites you under false pretenses, just to tear you down for entertainment, you don't owe them your silence or your participation. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. He looked straight into the camera, his voice unwavering. And to those watching who think this is what accountability looks like, ask yourself, would you want to be treated this way? Would you want your beliefs challenged through honest dialogue or through ambush and public shaming? The room was dead silent as Gere left the stage. Behind him, Colbert stood frozen at his desk, face twisted with a mix of anger and something that looked eerily like panic. No one in the audience moved. They didn't know whether to clap or just walk out. For a long moment, Colbert said nothing. His confident, polished persona had shattered. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and certain. Well, that was certainly something. But the moment had already passed. The damage was done. In trying to tear down Richard Gere, Stephen Colbert had revealed something about himself. And everyone in that room knew. They had just witnessed a moment that would be talked about for years, This wasn't about who won or lost. The real question was, how had we come to this? When did a humanitarian conversation become a battlefield for personal destruction? As the camera stopped rolling, the only sound left was the echo of Gere's footsteps fading down the hall, dignity intact. Message delivered? Unshaken by everything Colbert threw at him. So what do you think? Was Richard Gere right to walk away? Or should he have stayed and fought back? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to subscribe.